Commander Xylo Kern stood at the viewport of the diplomatic cruiser, Stardust, his powerful physique mirrored in the reinforced transparent steel. The vessel's sleek interior thrummed with the soft whisper of its environmental control systems, a testament to the sophisticated technology that permitted diverse species to share the same enclosed space. "Commander, we are nearing the confluence," announced Sub-Lieutenant Lyra Nova, her voice a melodic murmur. Her alabaster skin seemed to shimmer beneath the ship's subtle illumination. Her long platinum blonde hair flowed down her back, a stark contrast to her obsidian combat uniform. The pointed tips of her ears flickered slightly as she adjusted the controls with practiced elegance. "Proceed, Sub-Lieutenant," Kern ordered, his voice resonating with the inherent authority of a seasoned officer. He observed as the immense subterranean complex of Neo-Themyscira emerged into view, a sprawling metropolis of research facilities and ancient ruins etched deep within the planet's mantle. The Stardust glided through the colossal entry portal, its hull reflecting the unearthly azure radiance of the energy barrier that separated the pressurized docking bay from the vacuum of space. As the ship settled into its berth, warning indicators flickered, revealing the atmospheric composition of the planet below. "Sir," Lyra's voice held a note of urgency, "the atmosphere. It's predominantly oxygen. We must equip our environmental gear immediately." She reached for her respirator with trembling fingers. Kern watched with barely suppressed amusement as she secured the breathing apparatus to her face. Her sapphire eyes widened in alarm as she realized he was making no move to protect himself. "Commander, what are you doing? You'll perish." She reached for a spare respirator, but Kern gently grasped her wrist. "Sub-Lieutenant," he said, a slight smile playing on his lips, "there is something you ought to know about Terrans." The docking bay doors opened with a gentle sigh, and Kern inhaled deeply, exaggerating the intake of the oxygen-rich atmosphere. "Smells like home." "You can breathe oxygen?" Lyra exclaimed, her voice muffled by her mask, a blend of astonishment and wonder in her tone. "Breathe it? We require it to survive. Terra Prime's atmosphere is roughly 21% oxygen. It's what sustains us." He tapped his chest. "Every cell in our bodies demands it." Lyra stared at him, as if perceiving him anew. "But oxygen is intensely reactive. It's corrosive. How can your species possibly?" "Evolution, Sub-Lieutenant," Kern replied with a wink. "A remarkable thing. Now, shall we commence our exploration of these ruins? I understand they might hold some intriguing insights into both our kindreds." Lyra followed Kern down the ramp, her movements deliberate and cautious. The underground complex spread before them, a labyrinth of gleaming metallic corridors interwoven with sections of ancient stonework. Holographic signage flickered in various xenolanguages, casting multicolored shadows across their path. "Your species never ceases to astound me, Commander," Lyra said, a trace of admiration in her voice. "The Sylvani have always regarded oxygen-rich environments as lethal zones. We never conceived that any advanced species could thrive in such conditions." Kern chuckled, the sound resonating off the metallic walls. "Terrans are full of surprises, Sub-Lieutenant. We're not merely oxygen breathers, we're apex predators who evolved on a high-gravity, hazardous world. Terra Prime makes this locale appear to be a tranquil resort." They approached a security checkpoint where a hulking Graxonite guard stood watch, its chitinous armor gleaming under the artificial illumination. The creature's multifaceted eyes focused on Kern's unprotected face with evident surprise. "Credentials," it clicked in galactic standard, mandibles twitching. Kern transmitted their diplomatic codes while Lyra explained their mission. "We are here to investigate the ancient archives, specifically the sections pertaining to early interspecies contact." The Graxonite processed their credentials, all 6 eyes still fixed on Kern's unassisted respiration. "The Terran requires no atmospheric protection?" "None whatsoever," Kern replied with a grin. "Though I wouldn't decline a cup of caf, if you have any." The security barrier shimmered and dissolved, granting them passage. As they progressed deeper into the complex, the architecture gradually transitioned from modern to ancient, with smooth metal yielding to stone carved with intricate glyphs. "These markings," Lyra mused, running her gloved fingers along the wall, "they resemble some found in Sylvani ruins, but are considerably older. Our archaeologists estimate they date back at least 50,000 cycles." Kern approached the wall, his trained eye discerning details that others might overlook. "Observe this section here," he pointed to a series of glyphs. These symbols appear to be depicting different atmospheric compositions, and this one, he traced a familiar pattern, represents Terra Prime's atmosphere. Lyra leaned closer, her mask nearly touching the ancient stone. Impossible. These ruins predate humanity's spacefaring era by millennia, unless, Kern said slowly, we're not the first Terrans to reach the stars. A distant rumble interrupted their discourse, causing dust to drift down from the ceiling. Both instinctively reached for their weapons, Kern's hand resting on his plasma pistol, while Lyra's fingers brushed the energy blade at her hip. That didn't feel natural, Kern muttered, his combat instincts activating. We should. Another rumble, closer this time, followed by the distinct sound of stone grinding against stone. Commander, Lyra's voice was tense, I'm detecting multiple movement signatures converging on our position. Kern drew his weapon, its power cell humming to life. So much for a tranquil research mission. Prepared to witness how Terrans handle themselves in a confrontation, Sub-Lieutenant. The ancient defense systems activated with a deafening roar, sending cascades of energy bolts through the corridor. Kern's combat training engaged instantly as he pulled Lyra behind a massive stone pillar, their bodies pressed close together in the confined space. Well, this is intimate, he quipped, feeling her rapid heartbeat against his chest. Even through her mask, he could see her cheeks flush a pale lavender, the Sylvani equivalent of a blush. Focus, Commander, Lyra chided, but her voice held a hint of playfulness. She drew her energy blade, its violet glow illuminating the space between them. Those are not standard security measures. Kern peered around the pillar, analyzing the pattern of the energy bursts. No, they're not. Observe the design, it's integrated into the stone itself. This is original equipment, likely as old as these ruins. Another barrage of energy bolts forced them closer together. Lyra's silvery hair brushed against Kern's neck, sending an unexpected shiver down his spine. He became acutely aware of her presence, the graceful curves of her body fitting perfectly against his muscular frame. The defense grid seems to be operating on some kind of pattern, Lyra observed, her analytical mind working despite their intimate proximity. There's a 3-second gap between bursts. Then that's our window, Kern replied, his voice dropping to a husky whisper. Ready to dance, Sub-Lieutenant. They moved in perfect synchronicity, diving and rolling between bursts of energy. Kern couldn't help but admire Lyra's fluid grace as she wielded her energy blade, deflecting shots that came too close. His own plasma pistol sang in harmony with her weapon, taking out defense turrets with precision strikes. As they advanced deeper into the complex, the architecture began to change. The stone walls gave way to a material that seemed to pulse with an inner light, responding to their presence. Ancient glyphs glowed as they passed, telling a story neither of them could fully comprehend. These markings, Lyra mused, running her fingers along the wall, they're describing some kind of exodus. Observe this symbol, it corresponds perfectly with ancient Sylvani records of our original homeworld. Kern studied another section of the wall, his eyes widening. And this one, it's Terra Prime, but not modern Terra Prime. This depicts continental formations from over 100,000 cycles ago. They exchanged meaningful glances, the implications hanging heavy in the air between them. Commander, Lyra said softly, what if our peoples aren't strangers to each other? What if we share a history that's been lost to time? Before Kern could respond, the floor beneath them shifted. They stumbled, and Kern caught Lyra instinctively, pulling her against him. Their faces were inches apart, her mask the only barrier between them. The moment stretched, charged with unspoken tension. Your heart rate has accelerated, Lyra observed, her voice barely above a whisper. Is it the peril, or? She left the question hanging. Kern smiled, his hands still resting on her waist. Perhaps it's the company. A distant rumble broke the moment, and they reluctantly separated. The corridor ahead opened into a vast chamber, its ceiling lost in darkness above. At its center stood a massive holographic projection device, ancient but somehow still functional. By the first star. Lyra breathed, approaching the device. This technology, it's beyond anything in our records. Kern followed, his combat-trained eyes scanning for threats. Can you activate it? Lyra's fingers danced over the controls, her engineering expertise evident in her confident movements. The device hummed to life, projecting a 3-dimensional map of the galaxy. But it wasn't the galaxy they knew. This map showed stellar configurations from thousands of cycles in the past. Observe these travel routes. Kern pointed to glowing lines connecting various systems. They're showing regular traffic between Terra Prime and... Is that the Sylvani homeworld?
Impossible.
Lyra whispered, but the evidence was right before them. Our peoples. We were connected long ago. But why don't we remember? The hologram shifted, showing a catastrophic event, a massive energy wave sweeping through the galaxy, destroying the ancient network of connections. Kern and Lyra watched in stunned silence as the history of their peoples unfolded before them. A forced separation, Kern mused, his hand finding Lyra's in the darkness. But here we are, finding our way back to each other. Lyra turned to him, her sapphire eyes intense behind her mask. Perhaps some connections are meant to be restored, she said, her free hand resting on his chest, feeling his strong heartbeat. The chamber's lighting shifted, bathing them in a soft, ambient glow. The air seemed to crackle with tension, both from the ancient mysteries surrounding them and the growing attraction between them. Your species continues to amaze me, Lyra admitted, her fingers tracing the contours of his armor. You breathe poison, evolved on a death world, and yet you're capable of such gentleness. Kern caught her hand, bringing it to his lips in a gesture that transcended species. We're full of contradictions. It's part of our charm. The facility's defense system surged with renewed intensity, forcing Kern and Lyra to retreat into a small antechamber off the main corridor. Ancient emergency protocols sealed the heavy doors behind them, temporarily shielding them from the barrage of energy weapons outside. Well, Kern grinned, catching his breath, that was exhilarating. His armor's diagnostic display showed minor damage, but nothing critical. The room's ambient lighting cast a soft blue glow across his features, highlighting the fresh scrapes on his battle-worn armor. Lyra removed her mask briefly to check it for damage, revealing her striking features. The oxygen-rich atmosphere made her feel lightheaded, but she couldn't help stealing glances at Kern. Your combat prowess is impressive, she admitted, her voice carrying a hint of desire. The way you move in that armor, it's almost like watching a dance. Speaking of dances. Kern moved closer, his voice dropping to a low rumble. You're quite the performer yourself. I've never seen anyone handle an energy blade with such grace. The confined space of the antechamber seemed to amplify the electric tension between them. Lyra quickly replaced her mask, but not before Kern caught the subtle lavender flush creeping across her cheeks. The room appears secure, she said, trying to maintain professional composure while checking her tactical display. But the main defense grid is cycling through increasingly aggressive patterns. We should. Her words were cut short as Kern gently traced the edge of her mask with his finger. You know, he murmured, I've been wondering something since we first met. How do Sylvani kiss with these masks in the way? Lyra's breath caught in her throat. Commander, this is hardly the time. But her body betrayed her words as she leaned into his touch. We might not get another chance, Kern replied, his other hand finding the small of her back. Those defense systems aren't going to wait forever. The ancient room seemed to respond to their mounting tension, its walls pulsing with a soft, rhythmic glow. Lyra's tactical sensors detected changes in the atmospheric composition. The room was automatically adjusting to create a safe environment for both species. The ancients thought of everything, she whispered, her fingers finding the clasps of her mask. This chamber, it's designed for interspecies interaction. Kern's eyes darkened with desire. Smart ancestors we had. What followed was a dance as old as life itself, transcending species and time. Their encounter was a revelation of trust and discovery, each movement a celebration of their differences and similarities. The ancient chamber provided them with perfect privacy, its systems ensuring their safety while they explored this new dimension of their relationship. Later, as they lay entwined on the chamber's surprisingly comfortable floor, Lyra traced the scars on Kern's chest. Your species truly is remarkable, she mused. You breathe poison, your bodies are built for war, yet you're capable of such tenderness. Kern kissed her forehead, marveling at how natural it felt. Humans are full of surprises. It's what keeps life interesting. A distant explosion jolted them back to reality. The defense systems were evolving, becoming more aggressive in their attempts to reach them. Time to move, Kern said, quickly donning his armor while Lyra secured her mask and combat suit. The control room should be 2 levels down. If we can reach it, we might be able to shut down these defenses and access the facility's main database. Lyra checked her energy blade's charge. The corridors will be heavily guarded. The defense systems seem to be learning from our previous encounters. Then we'll just have to be unpredictable, Kern winked, readying his plasma pistol. Ready to show these ancient security measures why Terrans and Sylvani make such a dangerous combination? They burst from the antechamber in perfect synchronization, their movements complementing each other with practiced precision. Kern's raw power and tactical genius merged seamlessly with Lyra's grace and technical expertise. As they fought their way through increasingly challenging defensive measures, the facility's AI seemed particularly interested in their partnership, adjusting its attacks to test their coordination. Holographic projections flickered around them, showing ancient battles between Terrans and Sylvani, fighting side by side against some long-forgotten threat. "Look at these recordings," Lyra called out between deflecting energy bolts. "Our ancestors didn't just know each other, they were allies." Kern vaulted over a defensive barrier, providing covering fire as Lyra hacked into a security node. "Maybe that's why this place is reacting to us so strongly. We're not just intruders, we're their descendants, coming home." The corridor ahead suddenly transformed, its walls shifting to reveal a direct route to the control center. But the path was heavily defended, bristling with weapon emplacements and energy barriers. "It's testing us," Lyra realized, her eyes bright with understanding. "The facility wants to know if we're worthy of the knowledge it contains." Kern checked his weapons and gave her a roguish smile.
Ten lets show it what humanity and the Sylvani kendo togeter.
Ready to make our ancestors proud. The facility's control room loomed ahead, but the path transformed into a gauntlet of challenges. Holographic barriers shimmered with ancient power, while combat drones materialized from hidden chambers, their designs unlike anything in modern databases. "These aren't just security measures," Kern observed, his tactical display highlighting multiple threat patterns. "They're trials. Look at the symbolism in these holograms. They're recreating ancient battles." Lyra's sensors detected unusual energy signatures. "The facility is scanning us, Commander. It's measuring our compatibility, both with each other and with whatever knowledge it contains." The first trial manifested as a complex series of energy fields that required perfect synchronization to navigate. Kern and Lyra moved as one, their bodies flowing through the deadly matrix with practiced grace. Their recent intimacy had heightened their awareness of each other's movements, making them an even more effective team. "You're breathing," Lyra noted as they cleared the first obstacle. "It's completely steady, despite the exertion. The oxygen, it really does make you stronger." Kern flashed her a confident smile. "Oxygen is rocket fuel for Terran cells. The more we exert ourselves, the more efficiently we use it." He demonstrated by sprinting through a barrage of plasma bolts, his movements precise and powerful. The second trial presented them with a massive holographic projection of an ancient battlefield. The facility's AI spoke for the first time, its voice echoing in both Terran and Sylvani languages. To proceed, experience the truth of unity. Before they could react, a consciousness transfer device activated, pulling their minds into the ancient memory. They found themselves embodying their ancestors during a crucial battle, Kern as a Terran warrior, and Lyra as a Sylvani battle mage. The experience was overwhelming. They felt everything their ancestors felt, understood their thoughts, shared their victories and fears. Most importantly, they witnessed the profound trust between the two species, fighting side by side against a cosmic horror that threatened both their worlds. When the vision ended, they found themselves holding each other tightly, their bodies trembling from the intensity of the shared memory. Kern gently wiped away the tears that had formed beneath Lyra's mask. "By the first star," she whispered, "we were magnificent together." "We still are," Kern replied, his voice husky with emotion and desire. Their moment of connection was interrupted by proximity alarms. External forces had indeed detected the facility's power signature, and multiple ships were entering orbit. "Graxonite warships," Lyra confirmed, checking her tactical display. "They must have detected the energy surge from the consciousness transfer."
Perfect timing, Kern growled.
"We're so close to the control room." The facility's final trial activated, a combat simulation that required them to defend their position while solving complex technological puzzles. Kern's raw combat prowess complemented Lyra's technical expertise perfectly as they worked their way through the challenge. The ancients knew what they were doing, Kern commented between firefights. These trials, they're not just testing our abilities, they're proving that Terrans and Sylvani are stronger together. Lyra's fingers danced over an ancient control panel, her mind processing patterns that seemed familiar from their shared vision. The facility is responding to our bond. Look at these readings. It's accepting our genetic signatures as valid command authorization. The final barrier to the control room dissolved, just as the facility's external sensors detected boarding parties entering the upper levels. Kern and Lyra rushed inside, securing the entrance behind them. The control room was a marvel of ancient engineering, its systems humming to life at their presence. At its center stood a crystalline matrix that pulsed with living energy. The heart of the facility, Lyra breathed, approaching the matrix. And look, it's powered by oxygen reactions. Kern laughed. No wonder the ancients paired our species. Your technical brilliance and our natural affinity for oxygen-based systems. We complete each other, Lyra finished, removing her mask within the safety of the control room's regulated atmosphere. Her sapphire eyes met Kern's with an intensity that made his breath catch. The facility's AI spoke again. Genetic compatibility confirmed. Species bond verified. Access granted to progenitor archives. As the Matrix began downloading its secrets into their data cores, Kern pulled Lyra close. Ready to rewrite history, Sub-Lieutenant? Their kiss was interrupted by the sound of cutting torches at the outer doors. The Graxonite boarding parties were getting closer. Let them come, Kern said, checking his weapons. I've got oxygen in my blood and the galaxy's most beautiful warrior by my side. What could go wrong? The control room's defenses hummed to life as Kern and Lyra prepared for battle. The crystalline matrix continued its data transfer, bathing them in pulses of blue-white light that matched the rhythm of their synchronized heartbeats. Transfer at 43%, Lyra announced, her fingers dancing across the ancient controls. The facility's original defense systems are reactivating, but they'll need time to reach full power. Kern positioned himself near the entrance, his plasma pistol charged. Then we'll give them that time. The Graxonites aren't exactly known for their patience. The first explosion rocked the outer doors, sending vibrations through the ancient structure. Kern couldn't help but admire how the oxygen-rich atmosphere enhanced his combat reflexes, making every movement feel precise and powerful. You know, he called over his shoulder, I never properly thanked you for being so concerned about my breathing earlier. It's kind of sweet that your first instinct was to save me from the deadly oxygen. Lyra's melodious laugh filled the chamber. Well, how was I supposed to know Terrans were essentially walking oxygen processors? Though I must admit, your respiratory efficiency is rather impressive. The flirtatious banter was interrupted by the screech of metal as the Graxonite forces began cutting through the secondary barriers. Kern activated the ancient weapon systems they discovered, causing defensive turrets to emerge from hidden compartments. Transfer at 67%, Lyra reported. I'm also finding something interesting in the data. Apparently, the ancients designed this facility specifically for Terran-Sylvani cooperation. The oxygen-rich atmosphere isn't an accident. They wanted us to find this place. They wanted to bring our species back together, Kern realized, adjusting his tactical position. The doors finally burst open, and the battle began in earnest. Kern's combat expertise, enhanced by the oxygen-rich environment, proved devastating against the first wave of Graxonite warriors. His movements were fluid and precise, each shot finding its mark with deadly accuracy. Lyra split her attention between monitoring the transfer and providing support with her energy blade, deflecting any attacks that got too close to the Matrix. The facility's AI seemed to respond to their teamwork, activating additional defensive measures that complemented their fighting styles. Between waves of attackers, Kern and Lyra found moments of connection. Their eyes would meet across the chamber, conveying volumes of unspoken emotion. The shared danger only intensified their bond, making each touch, each coordinated movement, feel electric with possibility. Transfer at 89%, Lyra called out, her voice tight with excitement. The facility is also revealing an escape route. There's an ancient transport system that can take us directly to our ship. Kern dispatched another Graxonite warrior with a well-placed shot. Perfect timing. I don't think our friends out there are going to take kindly to us having this data. The final minutes of the transfer were the most intense. The Graxonite forces, realizing they were running out of time, launched an all-out assault. Kern and Lyra fought back-to-back, their movements perfectly synchronized, as if they'd been fighting together for years rather than days. Transfer complete, Lyra announced, just as Kern's plasma pistol overheated. Without missing a beat, she tossed him her energy blade while taking control of the facility's main defensive grid. The transport system is charging, she continued, initiating the escape sequence, but we'll need to time this perfectly. Kern grinned, wielding the energy blade with surprising skill. Trust in Terran timing, beautiful. We're pretty good at split-second decisions. The transport platform began to glow as ancient machinery awakened. Lyra secured the data core and moved to join Kern, her admiration evident in her eyes. The way you handle yourself in combat, it's like watching a force of nature. Oxygen is quite the performance enhancer, Kern winked, pulling her close as the transport system reached full power. Ready to make our dashing escape? The Graxonite forces breached the final barrier just as Kern and Lyra activated the transport. In a flash of brilliant light, they vanished from the control room, leaving their frustrated pursuers behind. The transport system deposited them in a hidden hangar where their ship waited, untouched. As they sprinted aboard, Lyra couldn't help but laugh. I still can't believe you breathe this stuff for fun. Kern pulled her into a passionate embrace once they reached the safety of the cockpit. Stick with me, Sub-Lieutenant, and I'll show you all sorts of surprising Terran talents. The ship's engines roared to life as they prepared for their escape, but both knew that their discovery would change everything, not just for them, but for both their species. The ancient alliance was about to be reborn, sparked by a simple question about breathing oxygen. The stardust burst from the underground hangar, its engines screaming as Kern pushed them beyond recommended limits. Behind them, 3 Graxonite warships emerged from orbit, their weapon systems charging. They really don't want us sharing this data, Kern remarked, executing a series of evasive maneuvers that would have crushed a lesser pilot. Under the G-forces, the ship's atmospheric regulators worked overtime to maintain the delicate balance both passengers needed. Lyra, her mask temporarily removed in the safety of their cabin, worked frantically at the navigation console. The ancient data, it's not just historical records, Xylo. It's a warning. The Graxonites aren't just after us, they're part of something bigger. A plasma bolt rocked the ship, but the advanced shields held. Kern's fingers danced across the controls, his movements enhanced by the carefully regulated oxygen mixture. Talk to me, beautiful. What kind of warning? The ancient alliance between Terrans and Sylvani, it wasn't just diplomatic. Our species were genetically engineered to complement each other. The oxygen adaptation, it wasn't natural. It was designed to make Terrans the perfect warriors against. Her voice trailed off as she stared at the data scrolling across her screen. Against what? Kern asked, though part of him already knew the answer. The Voidlings. A species that exists in the space between dimensions, feeding on conscious thought. The Graxonites aren't chasing us, they're being controlled by them. Another blast rocked the ship. Kern activated the ancient defense protocols they downloaded, watching with satisfaction as golden energy shields materialized around their vessel. So, Terrans breathe oxygen because we were designed to be living weapons against interdimensional parasites? That's actually pretty cool. Lyra's laugh was tinged with both amusement and anxiety. Only you would find that cool. But there's more. The Sylvani sensitivity to oxygen, it's because we were engineered to detect and track the Voidlings. Together, our species formed the perfect defense system. Kern executed a daring maneuver through an asteroid field, using the enhanced reflexes that his oxygen processing abilities granted him. So when you first asked me about breathing oxygen, I was unknowingly recognizing what my species was designed to identify, a warrior created to protect the galaxy. Her sapphire eyes sparkled with admiration. No wonder I found you so intriguing. The moment was interrupted by a direct hit that breached their lower hull. Warning lights flashed as the atmospheric system struggled to compensate. Lyra quickly replaced her mask, but Kern noticed her movements were becoming sluggish. The regulator's damaged, he realized. The cabin's oxygen levels are rising. Without hesitation, engage the autopilot and move to her side. We need to get you to the emergency shelter pod. No time, she gasped through her mask. The data. We have to warn both our governments. The Voidlings are preparing for a full-scale invasion. Kern's mind raced, enhanced by the increased oxygen levels that would have incapacitated his companion. The ancient files mentioned something about temporary genetic adaptation, a way to share resistances between our species. Lyra's eyes widened behind her mask.
The bonding protocol.
But, Xylo, it's irreversible. We'd be permanently linked, at a genetic level.
Another blast rocket the ship.
The pursuing Graxonite vessels were herding them toward what appeared to be a dimensional rift, exactly where the Voidlings wanted them. Well, Kern grinned, his hand finding hers. I was planning to keep you anyway. Ready to really see what breathing oxygen feels like. Their eyes met, volumes of unspoken emotion passing between them. With trembling fingers, Lyra initiated the bonding protocol from the ancient data core. The ship's medical bay hummed to life, ancient technology preparing to permanently alter their genetic codes. As the procedure began, Kern pulled her close. Remember when you thought I was going to suffocate? Looks like you'll be joining me in my oxygen-breathing ways.
Just promise one thing.
She whispered, as the transformation began. Promise me we'll make the Voidlings regret ever messing with the Terran-Sylvani pair. The genetic merger was intense but quick, their bodies adapting to each other's strengths. When it was complete, Lyra removed her mask, for the first time in an oxygen-rich environment, and her first breath was like tasting starlight. Now, Kern said, returning to the controls with renewed determination, let's show these dimensional parasites why the ancients chose our species to protect the galaxy. Together, they turned their ship to face their pursuers, their bodies and minds working in perfect harmony. The Graxonite vessels approached, unaware that they were no longer facing just a Terran and a Sylvani, but something new, something that combined the strengths of both species. You know, Lyra remarked, her fingers expertly programming attack patterns. Breathing oxygen isn't so bad after all. Kern's answering laugh was full of pride and affection.
Welcome to the club, beautiful. Now, shall we save the galaxy?
The Stardust's engines pulsed with ancient power as Kern and Lyra prepared for their most daring maneuver yet. Their genetic merger had transformed them into something unprecedented, a perfect synthesis of Terran strength and Sylvani sensitivity. 3 Graxonite warships on our 6, Lyra announced, her newly oxygen-enhanced senses detecting subtle distortions in space around their pursuers. They're trying to herd us toward that dimensional rift. Kern's fingers danced across the controls, his movements even more precise now that Lyra's genetic gifts enhanced his natural abilities. Then let's give them something they've never seen before. Ready to show them what happens when you mess with a Terran-Sylvani power couple. Lyra's melodious laugh filled the cockpit as she channeled power to their weapons. You know, breathing oxygen really does make everything more exciting. The Stardust executed a perfect barrel roll, avoiding a barrage of plasma fire while positioning themselves for a counterattack. The ancient weapons they downloaded from the facility responded instantly to their merged consciousness, golden energy lancing out to strike the lead Graxonite vessel.
Direct hit.
Kern crowed, admiring how the enemy ship's shields collapsed under their assault. The Voidlings didn't count on us accessing the old weapon systems. They also didn't count on this, Lyra added, activating a sequence she discovered in their merged genetic memories. The Stardust's hull began resonating at a specific frequency, disrupting the Voidling control over the Graxonite crews. The effect was immediate. 2 of the pursuing ships broke formation, their crews suddenly freed from interdimensional influence. The 3rd ship, however, intensified its attack. That captain must be fully possessed, Kern observed, executing another evasive maneuver. Time to show them why oxygen breathers shouldn't be underestimated. They moved together with perfect synchronization, their shared abilities making the Stardust dance through space like a living thing. The possessed Graxonite vessel couldn't match their maneuverability, especially now that Kern could process oxygen even more efficiently thanks to the merger. You know, Lyra said as she lined up their final shot, I used to think breathing oxygen was a death sentence. Now I understand why Terrans are so passionate about everything they do. Kern's grin was wolfish as he triggered their main weapons. Speaking of passion. The possessed Graxonite ship exploded spectacularly, leaving them free to contact their respective governments. However, as they set course for the nearest diplomatic station, both knew their greatest challenge lay ahead. The station's landing bay was crowded with representatives from both Terran and Sylvani governments when they arrived. Kern and Lyra emerged from their ship hand in hand, their merged nature immediately apparent to everyone present. "Commander Kern," the Terran ambassador began, his expression a mixture of shock and concern, "Sub-Lieutenant Nova, would you care to explain why our sensors detect significant genetic alterations in both of you?" Lyra stepped forward, her presence commanding attention. "Because we've discovered something that will change everything. The Voidlings are real, and they're preparing for a full-scale invasion." The next hours were spent in intense briefings, presenting their evidence and explaining the ancient alliance they'd discovered. The fact that they could both now breathe oxygen without assistance became a powerful symbol of what their species could achieve together. "The genetic merger was a necessary tactical decision," Kern explained to the assembled officials, "but it's also proof that our species were designed to work together, to fight together and to love together," Lyra added softly, her hand finding his under the conference table. The Terran and Sylvani officials exchanged worried glances, but the evidence was undeniable. The ancient data, combined with their merged abilities, presented a compelling case for reinstating the old alliance. "There's something else," Lyra announced, activating a holographic display. The facility contained coordinates for other ancient installations, places where more of our people can undergo the merger, if they choose to. "Choose" being the operative word, Kern added firmly. "This isn't about forcing changes on anyone. It's about giving our species the tools we need to face what's coming." As the officials debated, Kern and Lyra shared a private moment in the station's observation deck. The stars stretched out before them, holding both promise and threat. "Remember when you first freaked out about me breathing oxygen?" Kern asked, pulling her close. "How could I forget? It was the moment I started falling for you." Lyra's eyes sparkled with mischief. "Though I have to admit, being able to breathe it myself has certain advantages." Their kiss was interrupted by an urgent call from the conference room. The councils had reached their decision. 6 months after their fateful discovery, Kern and Lyra stood on the observation deck of the newly commissioned Unity Station, watching as another group of voluntary Terran-Sylvani pairs underwent the genetic merger. The massive space station, built using recovered ancient technology, orbited a binary star system that symbolically marked the border between Terran and Sylvani space. "Remember when you thought I was crazy for breathing oxygen?" Kern teased, his arms wrapped around Lyra's waist as they observed the proceedings below. "Now look at us, we're practically starting a trend." Lyra leaned back against his chest, savoring the sensation of breathing freely without her mask. "Well, you have to admit, it was quite a shock at first, though not as shocking as discovering we were engineered to be the perfect match." The genetic merger program had been more successful than anyone anticipated. Thousands of compatible pairs had volunteered, each combination strengthening the alliance against the approaching Voidlings. But more than that, it had sparked a cultural renaissance between their species. "The latest intelligence reports show the Voidlings pulling back from 3 sectors, Kern reported, his enhanced senses detecting subtle changes in Lyra's breathing that indicated her pleasure at the news. "They didn't expect us to rediscover our ancient partnership so quickly, or so thoroughly," Lyra added with a sultry smile, turning in his arms. "Though I have to say, your oxygen-fueled stamina has proven quite advantageous, in multiple situations." Their passionate embrace was interrupted by a priority alert from the station's command center. The massive holographic display activated, showing the first major victory against a Voidling incursion. A combined fleet of merged Terran-Sylvani crews had successfully sealed a dimensional rift, using tactics that would have been impossible for either species alone. "Look at them," Lyra breathed, watching the footage. "The way they move together, fight together, it's beautiful." Kern nodded, pride swelling in his chest. "We've come so far from that first moment in the ruins. Who would have thought a simple question about breathing oxygen would lead to all this?" The station's artificial day cycle began to dim, simulating evening. Below them, the latest group of merged pairs was completing their adaptation period, their bodies adjusting to their new, shared abilities. "The ancient ones knew what they were doing," Lyra mused, her fingers tracing the contours of Kern's chest through his uniform. "Creating 2 species that could only reach their full potential together." "Speaking of potential," Kern's voice dropped to a husky whisper, "I believe we have some free time before the next briefing. Care to demonstrate some of those enhanced abilities?" Their quarters in the station had been specially designed for merged pairs, with atmospheric controls that could recreate any environment they desired. But they always kept it oxygen-rich, a constant reminder of how their journey began. Later, as they lay entwined in each other's arms, Lyra traced lazy patterns on Kern's skin. You know, I never properly thanked you for introducing me to the joys of oxygen breathing. Kern laughed, the sound rich with contentment. Well, you've certainly made up for it since then. Though I have to admit, I never expected our first meeting to lead to all this. A gentle chime indicated an incoming transmission. The holographic display showed another dimensional rift collapsing under the combined assault of merged crews. The Voidlings were losing ground across all fronts, their ability to control and manipulate other species severely compromised by the Terran-Sylvani alliance. We should probably get dressed, Lyra said reluctantly. The Council will want our input on the latest developments. Kern pulled her closer for one more kiss. Duty calls, but tonight, I'm thinking we could revisit that oxygen-rich garden they've set up in the botanical section. I hear it's quite stimulating. The station's corridors were filled with merged pairs as they made their way to the council chambers. Each couple represented a perfect blend of Terran strength and Sylvani grace, their shared ability to breathe oxygen a visible symbol of their unity. The council meeting was brief but significant. The Voidlings were retreating faster than expected, unable to counter the devastating effectiveness of the merged pairs. Plans were already being made to establish permanent joint colonies, ensuring their species would never be separated again. As they left the council chambers, Kern and Lyra paused to watch a new group of volunteers arriving at the station. Among them was a Terran male explaining to his wide-eyed Sylvani companion about breathing oxygen. Some things never change, Lyra laughed, squeezing Kern's hand. Thank goodness for that, he replied, pulling her close. Though I have to say, your shock was much cuter. The station's massive windows offered a spectacular view of the binary stars, their light representing the bright future ahead for both their species. Kern and Lyra stood together, breathing the same air, their hearts beating in perfect synchronization. You can breathe oxygen, they heard a distant voice exclaim, followed by familiar laughter. Shall we go help explain? Kern suggested with a grin. Lyra's eyes sparkled with mischief. Later. Right now, I believe you mentioned something about a garden.